What's up, guys? So I recently did a video on Pewdiepie and Smosh, which are two of the top YouTubers of the day. Both have tens of millions of subscribers, and I sort of ended up going on a sort of semi discussion on the philosophy of charity and whether it's actually worth it or not. And looking back, I think I did express a lot of sort of simpleton, sort of naive slash views, which in my opinion weren't that naive or simple. They were just concerns, and they were very valid concerns that a lot of people are in the same boat. They don't really know for sure. And it's very wise to actually be smart enough to have these concerns and express them rather than just, like a lot of people, blindly donate to charity and think you are going to a good cause, where in the long run potentially you could be donating to a scam. And I did touch on the fact that potentially the charity organization was corrupt in itself and spending a lot of that donation money, but I really feel like as of the current age, that sort of corruption doesn't really happen anymore in non-profit organizations. What I do want to touch on are some certain things that you sort of have to research before actually getting into a charity and blindly donating. Now, a lot of these things I don't have answers to, but I'm simply just expanding your mind and keeping a wary eye. You can most likely potentially find answers to these questions by researching on your own on the internet. But at the same time, some of these organizations still, even if you go to their website, are very, very sort of sketchy in the fact that they don't answer these on their website. And their website is just filled with a lot of very generic, simple sort of paragraphs where they say, "We will be saving children," and so forth. And so these are things that should be expressed, and they aren't. So the first one is something I've touched on in my previous video, which is the fact that charity in itself, let's just think about it. The most basic form would be like providing food and water, clean water, or some other form of health or Medicare to someone in a developing world that needs it, and this potentially saves their life. Most of the time it's aimed towards children or dying fetuses, or just people who are infected with stuff when they're born. And that's the most basic form of charity, in my opinion. And so one concern that can be brought up about this is, okay, you're doing this, and by doing this we are helping these people survive, but where does that lead in the long run? Does this lead to helping a developing nation who is completely corrupt in terms of government, and in the long run just aiding a corrupt system in continuing to prosper? That's option A, or potential route of A. And a counter argument that I feel certain organizations will say is that may be a downside, but we have a lot of upsides, which I will talk about later. A long story short, you end up helping stimulate an economy. The second possibility is the whole idea of we are helping these children survive, but will this just lead to more children and an overpopulation, and then just people feeding more and more, and just a huge overpopulation, because all we're simply doing is encouraging and validating the idea of these children being able to survive, and so the parents will breed more and more. And so that's option B, and I do have to touch on a lot of these before I continue on. So for option A, and I haven't really researched this a lot. This is, again, for your own sort of research, but it is a concern to be brought up. Apparently, the counter argument is that if we can sort of bring all these developing countries to a developed country over the years, then in the long run, we will be sort of revitalizing the entire economy, which will in the long run help us survive, help us from overpopulating the world or stripping the world of natural resources. And do I think that's true? Most likely not. I mean, developed countries end up, consuming more natural resources, but I'm not really too sure about that. And so again, I'm not here to explain these things. I'm simply here to express concerns you should have about charities. And the next thing for option B, which was just overpopulation, the again, I haven't really researched it a lot, but the expected counter argument from my experience is that if we do this, what will happen is that in the long run, sure, initially they might just be prone to sort of mate more and create more children, whereby the charities and donations will just help feed more, which will in the long run be slightly different, because in the long run they will realize that, okay, now all my children are surviving, so now I don't have to constantly mate and produce so many children because I'm scared not all of them will survive. So the overall goal in the long run is to change the mentality of these developing country parents, because their children can now survive with the educated healthcare, and therefore they can sort of just create one child which will survive rather than create 10 children. And so again, I'm sort of muddying up the explanation here because I'm not the best speaker, but essentially what happens in Africa is these parents, a lot of their children will be dead or not survive birth, so they will make a lot of children, and that's their sort of mindset. It's a common sort of animalistic mindset that a lot of mammals have. And by changing that with healthcare and all of their children having high rates of survival, the parents supposedly will change their mindset and start reproducing less, and in the long run will lead to less children being born by their parents, which will potentially lead to sort of a less risk of overpopulation. And why is overpopulation bad? Because it's all crowded, there's not enough resources, and humans just end up sort of being a parasite and consuming all the resources in the land, and then leaving the land barren and then migrating to a different land, which will end up pretty much just depleting the entire world of resources, and then ending up with the extinction of the human species as well as the other species due to human means. And that's one of the concerns of overpopulation. And my concern for this is that, sure, you can in fact do this in the long run, but what if these parents choose not to do that? They see that a lot of their children are surviving, but they make no change in their reproducing habits. So they still reproduce just as much, they still give birth to like 10 children, and now the only change is that all of them survive, and then we just get a huge line of constant reproduction. And maybe potentially we can persuade them to change their habits, or maybe we won't. In fact, the only real sort of indoctrination would be China, where the government had to step in and sort of tell people you can only have one child. Other than that, there really hasn't been that much change as far as I can see. So we don't know if this will in fact really help. And the whole mindset behind what the parents are doing is their goal is to have more children that survive. And if that's their goal, then this sort of charity won't lead to a reduction in overpopulation, because the mindset of the parents will still be the same. Before, they didn't have this sort of healthcare and Medicare to sort of help their children along and have more of them survive. So what they did was they just reproduced more, so they had a lot more chances of a child surviving. And that might be an end result of 1 or 2 children out of 10 births, and that's just a hypothetical number. Whereas now, with the healthcare and Medicare from charity, now a lot of them are surviving more, but that might not convince the parents to stop reproducing so much. And so now maybe 4 or 5 out of 10 children survive, or potentially more. 8 or 9 out of 10 survive. Now they might decide, okay, my mindset is still the same. I want to reproduce as many children as possible. And who's to blame for that? No one's to blame. That is like the central dogma of every sort of organism, from bacteria to parasites to mammals to fish. Their overall goal from a biological standpoint is to survive and create as much progeny or children as possible who survive and can carry this on. So this is a natural biological thing, and who's to say we can convince these parents who are living in Africa or wherever to change this? And one could reason, oh well, we humans are more intellectual than that, so maybe we can convince them to change. But I mean, in Africa, regardless of how intellectual we may seem, all of us are, at the end of the day, still human, still mammals, still animalistic, and we will have that sort of proclivity to sort of reproduce more. So we don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if this will actually lead to a sort of reduction in overpopulation in the long run. Potentially, it couldn't. It could potentially just lead to an increase in overpopulation, or potentially something else. But these are concerns that you should have before donating to a charity. You want to make sure that they have addressed them, that they have answered them, and most likely these are concerns that have been brought up before and have been answered before. And these explanations may be flawed, or they may be completely logical to your understanding. But it's up to you to decide if that's true. And at the end of the day, there's a lot of theorizing going along. And theory is much different from fact, or at least a solid theory is a lot different from just a hypothesis. And so just because they're saying, oh, this will happen, doesn't mean that it will. So there's a lot of even more stuff I haven't mentioned that play into this, such as demographics and culture and government in the area and all this stuff. So you really have to be sure before donating to charity. And a lot of people don't really consider this. I know people who are sort of simpletons. They see someone starving and they say, I'm going to donate this money to help this person survive. And at the end of the day, that is something that you should do. You don't want to see suffering. You don't want to see pain. But quite honestly, are you really in the long run, in the big picture, doing something that will help? And I feel like it's really, really something you have to think a lot and research on your own and figure it out. I do feel like if you only have enough to donate to one person, maybe someone starving on the street that you see, then do it. But it's the same thing with something where you see like a homeless guy and you just give them money. And if you just blindly do that, they could spend it on drugs. They could spend it on the lifestyle that caused them to be in the situation they're at right now. Whereas if you sort of, again, here's a sort of cliche analogy, teach someone to fish rather than just give them fish, they can sort of change their lifestyle and change it to something where they themselves can develop a new lifestyle that will lead to different results. So again, back to the homeless guy analogy. If you just see him, give him like $50 in cash, and then just leave, thinking you've done something good, thinking you have been sympathetic and a good guy, and given him a meal to eat, then what if you're just potentially reinforcing and validating him to continue living his lifestyle. And it's something very humanistic that even me, I sort of get caught up in. If you keep getting support for a very bad lifestyle you're living, for me it may be something different, like you're getting approval for playing video games all day, and no one is sort of ragging on your tail that your grades are going down the drain because you're just getting constant approval. Then that's sort of the same thing with this homeless guy. If he can sort of just stand there on the street with a cup open, and he potentially makes enough money for him to be happy, just from people giving him money, then he will continue living his sort of toxic lifestyle of doing drugs or killing himself through drugs and not seeking to change anything about him, or even seek to get a job, or do all this toxic stuff that's ruining his body and his mind. And that's just something that you have to take into consideration. There are people out there who just see a homeless guy and they'll be slightly wise and they'll say, I'm not going to give him cash. I might give him food, or I might give him a McDonald's gift card so he can only spend it on food. Sure, in the short term, you may be sort of being sympathetic in helping him, but in the long term, you are potentially just sort of validating their lifestyle. You are telling them it's okay to live the life exactly how you are as a homeless guy with all the stuff you are doing, and it's okay because I will constantly be here to give you free food and help you live your life as you are now. And they will find no need to change, and you are potentially not really doing anything. So I think you really have to sort of research into charities. I'm not saying that charities are a bad thing. I really do think that if you have the choice between donating and spending your money on an Xbox or a video game, then charity is the better option for sure. By the way, there's something called humblebundle.com where you donate to charities and they give you free games for that. But back to my topic, you really do have to sort of do your own research. I don't think that all charities are bad, and a lot of charities do address 100% of all the concerns I have brought up, and they have found answers to all of them, and they have displayed these answers on their websites. But at the same time, there's some that haven't. So you really have to do your own research. And I do feel that there are charities out there who have addressed all these concerns and have found solutions that are viable to all of these, and have addressed the bigger picture rather than the smaller picture. And that's just how it is. And I do feel that the person who is out there sort of looking to fix the bigger problem, maybe it be the government official or just someone who's trying to change the sort of employment system or economy, is in certain ways better off than the sort of coordinator who is just coordinating this constant food kitchen or sort of charity organization where they just go around asking people for money and then spending that money 100% on food to give to homeless people. And again, there's always exceptions to the rule. Both of these people, the coordinator and the government official, are a lot better than the average viewer who's watching this video, who has probably donated $0 to charity and have done nothing but have a bucket load of opinions on the topic and a lot of complaints themselves, much like me. But at the same time, I have donated more than $0 to charity. So there you go. I have donated a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit to charity. So at the same time, you do have to do your own research. And long story short, just figure it out if you really have any of these concerns. And again, the soup kitchen coordinator, he could be potentially solving the issue at hand by developing a system on his own that may in fact combat a sort of consistent lifestyle by maybe, along with the soup kitchen, communicating with the homeless people and encouraging them to change their lifestyle or change their ways. Who knows? And then again, there's always exceptions. Another exception could be that the homeless guy, maybe one time out of 10, isn't this sort of drug user who has ruined their life. Maybe he started out that way, but now he has given up on drugs. He wants to sort of get out there, but because of the economy and the lack of jobs, despite him hustling 24/7, he still can't find it. So there's a whole range of different things out there. Again, I'm not here to spur debate or fighting in the comments of this video. These are just sort of concerns you have to address. I do think there are good charities out there, but there are some bad ones. And that's all I have to say. Thanks for watching this whole video if you actually did. And as always, like, favorite, comment, and subscribe.